The Edmonton Oilers are betting favorites to take home the Stanley Cup entering the 2024-2025 season. This is the elevator pitch.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, hope everybody got a nice little fill of preseason hockey over the weekend. I hope everybody looking forward to Flames Oilers, a little split squad preseason action on Monday night. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. But today's show, the Oilers, they got some expectations this year. They're the betting favorite to take home the Stanley Cup entering this season. They are coming off of a season where they were as agonizingly close to winning the Stanley Cup as you could possibly be. And today's episode is really simple. We are going to make the elevator pitch as to why you should believe the Oilers can make this happen. There are a lot of factors that go into putting together a Stanley Cup caliber team. So I want to start our first segment today. We are going to tackle the ideas, the range of outcomes, how it comes together. Our second segment, we're going to talk about narratives, if there's a few surrounding this team. And then the third segment, we're going to hone in on the talent. We're going to make an argument that they got the Johnnies and Joes as much as they've got the X's and O's, the narrative, everything you need to pull it together. So let's start at the outset. I talked about this on Friday's show, and a lot of people disagree with me, but I'm going to reiterate it here right now. The NHL has 32 teams as we currently sit. There may or may not be 2 to 4 more teams in the pipeline in the not so distant future. But as we sit here on September 23rd, 2024, the NHL has 32 teams. Of those 32 teams, we can eliminate at least 10 of them out of the gate as being Stanley Cup contenders. We can take Anaheim, San Jose, Columbus, the Flyers. We can take Montreal. We can take Columbus. There are so many teams. I can keep going. We could take Minnesota. We could take St. Louis. Shall I keep going? Do I need to keep going? I mean, I don't understand this argument that there is parity in the NHL. There isn't. It is a bunch of mediocre teams all beating up on each other. I think very clearly when you look at the NHL entering the season right now, and of course, things can change. We could be having a very different conversation come the trade deadline where teams that are on the fence make some moves and push themselves closer to the middle of the conversation where we are, where the Oilers are. But that upper crust of the NHL entering this season, Edmonton is firmly in there. The Rangers are in there. Dallas is in there. Florida's in there. I would say Colorado is probably in there. I would say Vancouver is in there. Other than that, I'm not really sold on Nashville yet. The Jets, the Leafs, come on. The Lightning, no. The Hurricanes, no. The Devils, no. The Bruins, no. There are so many teams in this league that just aren't in that weight class, that they might have the high-end talent to go head-to-head, but once you get past that second line, the Oilers' depth or the Stars' depth or the Rangers' depth will take over and outlast in a long series. Or against a team with a little bit more depth than we can point to the Western Conference Finals last year, even if you have comparable depth, if your Stars are better than their Stars, your Stars are going to win. And that's what happened to the Stars. When it came down to it, Connor McDavid locked in and said, we ain't losing. Right now, as we sit here, there are maybe 5 or 6 teams I can make a serious argument for being Stanley Cup caliber. When you look at the recent history of the NHL over the last 5 to 10 years, especially in this playoff format, where by November, by American Thanksgiving, we're going to have an idea who's in the playoffs. And then by January or so, we're probably going to know who's playing who. And that alone weeds out a lot of competition. So let's take an example. Let's look at the Pacific and let's look at what the odds makers project. Right now, Edmonton is projected to win this division. Then, odds-wise, it goes Vancouver, it goes LA, it goes Vancouver, Vegas, LA. Of those 4 teams, Vancouver, I can make an argument for if Thatcher Demko is healthy. If he's not healthy, the Canucks are out entirely. Vegas, that's a little bit more of a legacy appeal to me. That they did it a few years ago. They've got the same core guys, other than no Marchessault, but you added Noah Hannafin, you've got Shea Theodore, you've got Pietrangelo, you got Eichel, you got Stone. That's enough to get you a seat at the table. That is enough for me to consider you seriously. Beyond that, the Kings, no. Calgary, no. Seattle, no. Utah, no. The Sharks, no. The Ducks, no. Okay, so in this format, that means the Oilers, should they win the division, would be playing the first wild card or second wild card, depending who finishes higher in the Central. But for the purpose of this point, the Oilers are going to get a favorable first round matchup should they win the division. If they finish second, they're going to play the Kings or the Canucks. They beat both of those teams last year, and I would argue the Oilers are better right now than those teams are right now. They were better last year, and the Oilers were able to make some additions. The Kings lost some depth, and the Canucks, I know Arthur Shelovs was pretty good for them in that playoff run last year against Nashville and against Edmonton. I saw what happened when you put the Oilers stars head-to-head against the Canucks stars. And yes, I understand Brock Besser didn't play Game 7. They didn't have Demko at all in the playoffs. I trust the Oilers stars. It is a lot more conceivable for me to see the Oilers amongst that final 8. Okay, I want to frame it this way. Most teams are pretty content to just make the playoffs and see what happens. The Oilers, they're above that. The Oilers, their minimum this upcoming season is a second round appearance. If they don't make at least the second round, then I could see some serious changes being considered. I think, frankly, the way the Western Conference is this year, where really only Dallas and Vancouver are on your level, maybe Colorado, depending on Landeskog, depending on Nichushkin, but I'm not really sold on this version of the Avalanche right now. So we're talking about maybe 3 teams in total, depending how you feel about the Jets, maybe Nashville with Marchessault and Stamkos. But realistically, other than Edmonton, we're talking about Vancouver, we're talking about Dallas, maybe Colorado, maybe Vegas. That's it. The whole conference. The whole conference, we're talking 4 teams that have serious chances of beating the Oilers in a best-of-7 series. And I think the Oilers would be slight favorites against all 4 of those teams as we sit here right now. The path to the conference final is really straightforward, especially if the Oilers can win the division. Based on the way historical trends have gone, you're going to need about 107.5 to 100. You're going to need about 108 points if you want to win the Pacific Division based on the last 5 full seasons of the NHL. So not counting 2021 and not counting 2020, about 107, 108 points is going to do the job. That means probably winning something in the ballpark of 47 games and giving yourself 8 or 9 overtime losses to get you in there. But conservatively, our goal should be 50 wins. That gets us 100. And then 9 to 10 overtime losses puts us over the threshold. That's our goal. 50 regular season wins, 9 to 10 overtime losses, and then that final 22 games, however you want to distribute those. Regular losses, overtime wins, whatever. 50, 10 and blank is your goal if you're the Oilers, if you want to win this division. That will get you the first spot in this division. So we're going to take our first break of today's show. We're going to come back and we're going to tackle the narrative. We've been talking a lot about the teams around them. We are talking specifically about the Oilers coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. So be sure to stick around. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still live. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. If you're like me, you have been absolutely enamored with Malik Neighbors this season so far, dominating target share. I am all in on Malik Neighbors' receiving yards, receptions, and all other kinds of Malik Neighbors props. He's been one of the best in football so far in this young season. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's episode is Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. We are all driven by the search for more, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it leverages over 140 million unique qualifications and preferences every single day, which means Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use it, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers as we start the journey towards the regular season and then, hopefully, a journey towards a Stanley Cup, bringing it back to the City of Champions, where the Oilers are facing the burden of expectations now. I talk about this a lot. I find it to be one of the most fascinating concepts about sports, especially here in North America. The idea that because you are so good, because you are so great, you are expected to elevate everyone around you. And that's the entire organization. That's not just the guys on the ice with you. That is the coaching staff. That is the front office. That when you have such great players, anything less than a championship is insulting to the fans, to the players, and everyone involved in putting this all, everyone involved putting this all together. It is one of the most fascinating components of sports. And we have seen this before. The best player in the world, man on a mission, is one of the great narratives in professional sports. It happens from time to time. It happens more often in the other sports where there is more mobility in your career. You have easier opportunities and easier access to change teams earlier in your career. You can talk about LeBron doing this when he left Cleveland to go to Miami the first time or went back to Cleveland the second time. That's two separate instances. You can talk about Kevin Durant doing this, going from OKC to Golden State after losing to Golden State in the conference finals that year. You can talk about this in football. Brett Favre leaving the Packers to go to the Jets, then to go to the Vikings. You can talk about Aaron Rodgers doing this, going from the Packers to the Jets. You can talk about Tom Brady doing this, going from the Patriots to the Buccaneers. There is a long lineage of all-time great players, wronged, aggrieved, coming very close, and then the next season changing teams to break through and be able to finally meet that threshold. You could talk in hockey. Not as one-to-one as those, because this is a trade. Ray Bourque going from the Bruins to the Avalanche, chasing that cup at the end of his career. A little bit more amicable than some of the other ones, but the singular great player feeling the burden of expectations, feeling that chosen one burden, it is otherworldly levels of pressure. As much flack as Connor McDavid gets for his blank monolith personality from people outside, he has that guard up, that facade up to protect himself, to protect his mentals. You've heard me talk a lot on this show, the idea of you don't want to get too high, you don't want to get too low. You want to stay as even keel as you possibly can, because that's going to help you in the long run. And now you've equipped the best player in the world with meaningful playoff experience, where he went to the furthest point you can go without winning a Stanley Cup. He has that tangible feeling in him of how difficult it is to get to this point. We talk about this all the time in sports. The idea of, oh, well, they'll be back. They're so young. They're so talented. You'd be surprised how often those great teams don't go back. The Cubs won a World Series, ended a drought. They thought they had the core to last indefinite. You had Rizzo, you had Bryant, you had Javi Baez, you had Kyle Hendricks and Jake Arrieta. That should have lasted a half decade. They should have won multiple World Series. They never even made a second World Series. You can talk about some of the football teams we've had in recent memory. You can talk. I really want people to get a grasp on this. And if you're on the younger side, you're still in college, you're still in high school, you're even younger than that, you're in middle school listening to this, it is so hard to win a championship in any sport. Hockey is the hardest to win it in. The amount of repeat champions we have in hockey in comparison to the other sports, it makes it harder. You don't see teams rattle off 2, 3 in a row or 3 in 5 years in the other sports with frequency. Football, a little different. Those are extreme outliers where we have the Patriots do it, and we have the Chiefs on the precipice of maybe being able to go for 3. But in hockey, it is really hard. There are franchises that have never even played in a Stanley Cup final, let alone won a Stanley Cup final. And that's true of the other sports in their respective championship rounds. But it is hard to break through. And you have the best player in the world with a singular focus on winning. He tells you, I don't care about the trophies. I don't care about the regular season. I am here to win a championship and to restore Edmonton to the pedestal it belongs, because it is such a great market, because the fans are so intense. He understands that burden. And I, for one, am ecstatic to see what man on a mission Connor McDavid looks like, where he says, follow me, we'll make it happen. I, for one, cannot think of a player who needed less motivation than Connor McDavid. He went and found it. I bet you that at various points in the last 2.5 months, Connor McDavid has been sitting somewhere and he has had that moment of daydream. He has closed his eyes, or his eyes were open, and he was so zoned out he could picture it. He has the puck on his stick. Sergei Bobrovsky is leaning to the opposite side, and all McDavid needs to do is get the puck in the net, and they tie the game in Game 7. He had the chance of his life. And I promise you, I am not nearly as competitive or good at what I do as Connor McDavid is at what he is. I still have bad memories like that flash back to me about playing football, about playing baseball in high school and middle school, okay? Somebody on Connor McDavid's level, that is going to eat away at you to a point of obsession, where you are going to be so committed to making sure that never happens again, that you are going to be the best possible version of yourself. We're going to take one more quick break. Again, we are going to dive into the Oilers roster, and we are going to make the case why this version of the Oilers is prepared to break through and win a Stanley Cup. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. If you're like me, you've been loving the NFL season so far. Tonight, Monday Night Football, we got 2 games. The Jaguars going up to Western New York to take on the Buffalo Bills. The Bills 4.5-point road favorites. Then the slightly later kickoff, the Washington Commanders going to Cincinnati. We got a battle of LSU quarterbacks, Jane Daniels versus Joe Burrow. The Bengals, who have yet to look really good yet, 7.5-point home favorites. Then Thursday Night Football, my Giants got the Cowboys coming up off of a tough loss to the Ravens. Giants winning in Baltimore. Giants 4.5-point home favorites. I think I'll be riding with my Giants. That's FanDuel.com if you want to get in on the action. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we're making a very simple elevator pitch. I don't know if elevator pitches are still a thing anymore. I don't know if it's socially acceptable to corner people in an elevator and give them a pitch in the time it takes for them to get to their floor. But that terminology, that phrase, it does have meaning. This is a bit longer than an elevator pitch, being that this is a 30-minute podcast, but the fundamentals are in place. We established that the field is wide open. We've established that the best player in the world is going to be a demon this year. Now, let's peel it back. You, for the first time, can have 2 lines, 2 separate lines with 2 of the best players in the world, and know both are going to be entirely fine at 5-on-5. You have a top 10 defenseman in the world in Evan Bouchard. You think you have finally solidified the goaltender position for the long term. Now, it's simply about the supporting cast. I don't need 20 minutes a night. I don't need 18 minutes a night. If you, Corey Perry, and Vasily Podkolzin, and Derek Ryan can give me a good 14 minutes, we're going to have a good season. You, Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, and Matthias Janmark. Sorry about that, Janmark. I drew a blank for a second, but if you 3 can drive some possession, hold some offensive zone time, create some offense. If Connor Brown can flirt with 15 goals, if Janmark can get to 10, if Henrique is 40 to 45 points and strong 2-way, we are cooking. And look, I can't lie. I have been very pessimistic about the Oilers defense as a whole coming into this season. The argument on the Oilers' behalf is that the forward group is going to be so good, they will be able to mitigate the mistakes of the back end, that they will be able to play so well that the Oilers' defensive responsibilities are going to be minimal. And that's going to put a Troy Stetcher or a Travis Dermott or a Josh Brown or a Ty Emberson in a position to succeed. It is a lot easier for these guys to get acclimated, to get situated when they only have to worry about a little bit of the game. The less you have to worry about, the more you're going to get out of these spot start specialty types. No one is asking any of these guys to do anything insane. Defensively responsible, low risk hockey. Move the puck where it needs to go. Don't dawdle. Don't dwell on it. And please don't rim it out along the glass and don't alley-oop it out. We are going to play sound 200-foot hockey this year in Edmonton. We have 3 forward lines that are going to be able to contribute at both ends. I know that Draisaitl, Jeff Skinner tandem gives people pause about me saying that defensively. That duo is going to generate so much offensively, it won't matter what they do defensively. Their offense will absolutely outpace what they give back on the other end. When you are as good as Draisaitl, that is a calculation, a trade-off you are allowed to make. We talk about this all of the time. If you give up defensively, as long as you score more than the other team does, that's fine. That is fine. And Draisaitl's not being asked to carry an insane load. He's got 2 quality players in Arvidsson and Skinner with him who can both be 20 to 40 goal guys depending on how the cookie crumbles. It's not out of the question Jeff Skinner pots 30. It's not out of the question Victor Arvidsson pots 25 to 30. That is on the table this season for those guys playing with somebody as good as Draisaitl. This Oilers team has everything in front of them. A favorable conference, a relatively light field of Stanley Cup contenders. The best player in the world pissed off, and the most talented forward group Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl have had since being united in Edmonton. Everything is in front of them. Oh, I didn't even mention. It looks like they got one of the 5 good coaches in the NHL because Chris Knobloch actually understands what buttons to press and what gets good results. Now, I am inclined to say the new coach bump of last season was a real thing. Anytime you change the voice of a coach, you're going to get a kick in the butt. That's just the way it works in hockey. It's why you see in hockey that teams will fire even a good coach just to try and spur something. You saw the Blues do it last year, Craig Berube to Drew Bannister. You saw the Kings do it, going from to Jim Hiller. I can't remember who their coach was last year. That's embarrassing. But you get what I'm saying here. Everything is in front of them for the Oilers. They have the best odds to win the Stanley Cup for a reason. Everything is out here for the taking. This is not a murderer's row of Stanley Cup contenders. Yeah, if the Avalanche get Landeskog and Nichushkin going in addition to McKinnon, Rantanen, McCarr, Girard, Taves, sure. It's a tough series. The Oilers can win. If Dallas is humming all 3 lines, they get Stankoven, they get you get Wyatt Johnston, you get their young pieces, you get those guys successfully integrated to a Jason Robertson-led team already, yeah, they'll be a tough out, but we just saw the Oilers can beat them too. Vegas, yeah, Eichel versus McDavid is why we watch hockey, to see the best in the world go mano-a-mano. Oilers got more depth. Go look at the Vegas third line. Look, if the Oilers don't go all the way, it will not be because they don't have the ability to. It will simply be because of the way things fall. I feel comfortable saying the Oilers are good enough. They have winning the Stanley Cup in enough range of outcomes that I feel capable and comfortable saying that is as close to the expectation as reasonably possible to say to 1 of 32. All right, that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Hopefully, everyone is juiced up, excited to watch a little bit of preseason hockey. Hopefully, everyone is ready. We still got a ways to go till the regular season, but lock in. The journey starts tonight, preseason game number 1. I will talk to you guys tomorrow, but before we get out of here, please, if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, we're getting close. We're 30 away from 1,600. My goal by the end of next season, when the Oilers win the Stanley Cup, is to be 2,000 to 2,500 subs on YouTube for the channel. That's the goal. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the alarm bell so you get a notification whenever new content goes live. Let me know in the comments. Do you think I am insane, or do you think this is a good elevator pitch? I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.